Let's get into the top of the agenda, the three bumper cases before the tribunal tonight. They are headlined by North Melbourne's youngster Jackson Archer, who's trying to have his 3-game ban overturned. It has created so much commentary right across the terrain, including with our two coaches last night.
I mean, it was hard to watch. When you saw it on TV, you have those moments, you're like, oh, I don't really want to watch that one back. I hope the young fellow is okay.
Handball over the top, he goes. Cleary, can he run? Boom, crash opera, in they went.
We know Jackson Archer plays a little bit like his dad. You know, he's ferocious at the footy and at the opponent when he needs to be.
Well, he's an archer, so he's just never going to take a backward step.
Was their intent to Jackson Archer try and clean Luke Cleary up? No, he didn't. Yes, he came in quickly, but he, not for a minute, did he want to hurt Luke, I don't think. So, based off what I'd like to happen, I don't think he should be out of the game.
I always look back at the Jonathan Brown edits, and I would definitely tell players, don't do that. It's not worth it. You know, you're going to break your face open like he did numerous times.
The verdict landed about 20 minutes ago. Jackson Archer, he has had his suspension upheld, so he is out for 3 weeks. David Zita has watched all of this unfold. David, welcome back.
Thanks, Jared. Thanks, Gary.
Step us through the case as it unfolded.
Well, we thought this would go into the after hours, but really it was pretty cut and dried. It didn't last for too long, and Jeff Gleeson, Shane Wakelin and Jordan Bannister, the tribunal. North Melbourne came into this arguing Jackson Archer's conduct was not unreasonable in the circumstances and it was not careless. Jackson Archer gave evidence. He said that he was playing pressing defence, as Clarko teaches him to, not to get caught out and leapfrogged in the contest. His intent was to tackle fairly. He didn't anticipate Luke Cleary going to ground until Cleary's knee first hit the ground. That is when Archer realised this was different to most contests in his view. He said he then tried to brace and tried to halt momentum. They did show a graph that showed that 25% speed decrease just moments before impact, but ultimately the tribunal not satisfied with that. So Archer said no one remonstrated with him. He checked in with Luke Cleary the next day. Luke Cleary said back to him, I appreciate the apology, it's okay, and you've got nothing to worry about. The AFL said that Archer did not exercise a reasonable duty of care. So effectively, this came down to too little too late in the AFL's view. They said that he took 2 slowing steps, but by that point, contact was inevitable. He should have done it earlier. And this doesn't happen often, the AFL said, because players are more reasonable than Archer was in this circumstance. The tribunal deliberated for just over 40 minutes. They came back and said Cleary was always going to reach the ball before Archer. It was reasonably foreseeable that Cleary would go to ground in the way that he did, given it was an at-speed contest situation. Archer approached at excessive speed. He gave himself no reasonable opportunity to avoid harmful contact with Cleary in circumstances that were foreseeable. Again, they said he decreased by 25% prior to impact, but he was prior to that running as fast as he could and was approaching Cleary from front on. He slowed, in their words, too little and too late. His duty of care required him to slow more and slow earlier. It was unreasonable in the circumstances. His 3-match ban as a result stands.
So the starting point of this, Gaz, was never a contest for the ball. Archer said his intention was to tackle fairly, and that has weighed against him in the contemplations that have followed. And that the quote that won the day for the AFL was, the reason we don't see these types of incidents very often is because players simply take more care in a situation like this.
Yeah, so we have lauded it for many years, and what we would term an unconditional attack on the footy or the man with the footy. That's been something that, you know, we respect players for over a generation. You know, they go hard at the ball. How hard at the ball does he go? How hard at the man does he go? What we are now expecting of our players is that you have to be conditional. You know, that is an unconditional attack on the footy that ends up in a really unfortunate circumstance. And the tribunal have said today, hey, you've got to be more conditional than unconditional. And they're saying that players have made that adjustment in the main, that there aren't too many players left. Now, this is a hard lesson to learn for a young man that's showing unbelievable courage in the early stage of his career. But what the AFL are saying to him is, you're one of the last to learn this lesson, Jackson. And after tonight, it is incumbent upon everyone in the competition to learn it, whether you like it or not. So when there's a player in that position, you know, we've accepted the vulnerability of a front-on bump to someone that's conditional. You've got to be conditional in your attack on the footy. We're in that position. And now we're asking these players to be conditional again in these circumstances.
So no play on the ball. So he was always coming in to tackle fairly. So the velocity with which he approached. The one thing that did go in his favour was the acknowledgement that he did take short steps at the end and he dropped his velocity as best he could. He said he hit the brakes.
Yeah.
But he was propelling too fast into a contest that he was never a part of, and then he had to approach it in a manner to tackle fairly. Do you think it was foreseeable? So Jackson's been told it was foreseeable that Cleary would go to ground in front of you. Do you think that's fair?
Well, when there is doubt in your mind, we're asking a lot of these players. So we're saying you're charging straight at this man because that's the way you coach to play and that's in your gene pool, we know that. But in that process, you've got to make an assessment on whether or not he's getting lower and lower, and the likelihood is that he could be on the ground when you make that contact. And you're asking a lot? Yes, of course we are. But we know why we're doing this. And in the end, he loses no fans, Jackson Archer. He loses no respect in the footy world at all. He's just the subject of the latest learnings in what is now becoming a little more conditional for reasons that have been well documented.
So do you think most players have made this adjustment? That
Yeah.
You don't see this very often because the AFL says not many players approach it in
No, I
such a
agree with
way.
that. And if I'm trying to think back, back when we played, you do sum that up. And the short step that Jackson put in was the last two short steps. The short step has to come 10 metres earlier. To make that assessment to go, OK, now I can maybe slow up, maybe I can just, hover, not literally hover, but not charge to that extent. And it's a learning. I think everyone sat there tonight and said, I'll be interested to see where this goes because I'm thinking maybe free kick. Others are thinking, well, clearly coaches now are going to coach their players to say, hey, you've got to have a bit of discretion here in these situations. And we won't, as a football world, and this is another really important thing in this, we won't judge these players now if they slow up. And if they slow up and the player gets the ball and gets around them, then there'll be no commentary from me anyway to say, hey, you let your side down, you didn't go hard enough, because that's just the world we live in now.
Do you think those who feel like the game has been progressively diminished on a contest front will treat this as the latest cause célèbre on that front?
I hope not. I hope they're more evolved than that. And when I say evolved, I don't want you to park your love of physicality and violence in sport, if that's what it is that you love, but be evolved enough to understand why we are getting to this situation. And you'll still go to the footy on the weekend and there'll still be plenty of violence for you. Trust me, there'll be plenty of violence. So I accept the decision. I'm surprised by it. I thought he was going to get off, but I accept it. And the rest of us need to get on board. Yeah. I know the coaches will.
I think the way that it's been explained, it is easy to understand. Right. So I was in the opposite camp, but as the case unfolded, other than the concept, once Jackson's starting premise was that he was intending to tackle fairly, that took all the contest for the ball out of it. So you can't start with that premise because the player didn't start with that premise. So that takes out the below the knees, which we'll learn from Ray fully as we work our way through.
Now, this is much more your domain than mine. Are we better off as a code on the back of that result in terms of trying to have clarity in these instances?
Yes. So I think that one's really easy for the players to absorb. Right. And I do concede that you so rarely see that moment. Right. And we may never see it again.
No.
And for the half a dozen players who are cutting their teeth, that's the quick lesson. Don't be doing that.
Yeah.